Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Currently Speaking, the podcast of the Current Consulting Group. I'm Bill Current, founder of the Current Consulting Group, and today we're going to talk about hair testing, but from a very unique perspective. Before we do that, though, we just want to encourage you, if you like this, to like it online, to subscribe, to share it with your friends, help us grow our followership, so that more and more people can hear and benefit from the valuable information that we provide during these the Current Consulting Group podcasts. Now, as I mentioned, today we're going to talk about hair testing, and I have a very special guest with me today, Jessica Graham, supervisor with Taylor County in Texas in their adult probation. And she has a wealth of experience. She's been doing this for over 20 years. She has a wealth of experience in drug testing in the judicial system. And so with that, Jessica, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Now, I think it'd be really great for you to just take a few minutes to tell our audience a little bit about who you are, how you got into this, what your experience has been. And then I'll talk a little bit about hair testing. Then we'll go back to your experience.
Okay, sounds great. Like you said, I'm Jessica Graham. I work with adult probation in Texas. I have been doing this for 20 years. I've been a supervisor the last 7 of my 20 years. As far as my involvement with the hair testing, I did pilot the program in 2019 with Micro Distributing here in Texas. And so I was kind of the first person, I guess, in the field to actually use the test.
That's pretty interesting. Now, you've, over the course of your career, pretty lengthy career, you've had experience with other testing methods, right? Like urine and oral fluid, perhaps?
Yes, for 20 years. With both of those, we've used those for 20 years, yes.
Yeah, and what's interesting about the drug testing world right now is that a lot of organizations, whether they're employers, companies, or government entities, et cetera, are really looking at alternative testing methods as a way to sort of get their drug tests done, but in the most efficient and cost-effective ways possible. And so about 2 months ago, I wrote an article here at the Current Consulting Group about a new hair testing technique or methodology from Wanfo USA, which is the Safe Life Hair Processor and Test. It's a rapid result hair test. And I remember when we published the article, it was kind of like, that must be a typo or a mistake, right? A rapid result hair test. That's such a thing doesn't exist. But it does exist, and you've been using it, right?
Yes, so I haven't used, so to tell you a little bit about the pilot, so you kind of know my involvement with it, we did 150 samples. And through the course of that, it started, I believe, as a 5-panel test, then went to a 7-panel test. We added a couple of drugs in there, but you've always had your basic methamphetamines, cocaine, opiates, those things from the start. And then we added as you go on. And now I actually use a 12-panel test. But so all of those rapids were done. Information collected as far as was their hair dyed? If it was body hair, were they wearing deodorant? If it was any factor that someone might think would cause an inconsistent result or something like that, that was all documented. So the rapid was read and results were recorded. And then a separate lab collection was also done. And also everything was confirmed by the lab out of those 150 samples.
Interesting. Now, for the audience benefit, let me just explain that there are really 3 main drug testing methods. There's urine testing, oral fluid, and hair. And urine testing and oral fluid testing have been available for many, many years as both lab-based and rapid result or instant testing.
Yes.
Hair testing for all these years has been a lab-based test until recently with the issuing of the Wanfo USA Safe Life Hair Processor and Test. This is really new technology that brings the advantages of hair testing to a rapid result method. And so now you've got rapid urine testing as an option, plus lab, of course, rapid oral fluid testing plus lab, and now hair testing as both a rapid test that reveals a result, within minutes versus a lab-based test. Now, some of the advantages of hair testing that are very unique to hair testing are one, the window of detection, up to about 90 days. There's a little bit of a period right at the beginning, as after somebody ingests drugs into their system, where it's not going to be detectable in that sample from that usage. But if this is a chronic user, then the drugs are going to be detectable in their hair for about up to 90 days, right?
Correct. So typically, or at least what I've learned, is about 10 to 14 days is before it's detectable in hair. So you do have that window. But there's no other test that you're able to test for that 90-day span. So like to go along with what you said, typically people are not using just that once. So you're going to, catch that, for a lack of a better word, in that 90-day time frame. And then the good thing about that is if you test them with urine or oral fluid today, you can still hair test them because you're testing at 2 different time frames. So, and that shrinks that window of, you kind of maybe have a week or so in there where you're just not testing. So in just minimal time, you've tested them for 90 days practically.
Yeah, so with an oral fluid test, just as a refresher, drugs become detectable in an oral fluid sample within about 10 to 15 minutes after usage, because you're detecting the parent drug or the drug itself. With urine testing, there's a lag time of about 6 to 7 hours as the drug, as the body metabolizes the drug and the metabolite of the drug becomes detectable. And then it's detectable for about 3 to 4 days, longer even, but at 3 to 4 days at the cutoff levels that are commonly used. But with hair testing, once you get past that initial lag period, as Jessica said, of about 10 days, then you've got this very broad window of detection of about 90 days. And so, Jessica, tell us, in your profession, in your world, why is a wider or broader window of detection important?
Well, one, you can do one test to test that 90 days. And for the cost of the test, that is way more, in my opinion, cost effective. You would have to have someone come in about 2 at the minimum, but probably still not catch it 3 times a week and do urine tests on them to test that whole 90-day window versus the one hair test. And like I said, we do test a 12-panel test. So that actually tests a little bit more than what our urine tests do. And you have things like people that travel for work that you can't easily call in for a UA. You can allow them to continue to travel and still test them because you're testing them within that time frame of possible usage. We have people that are on minimum service caseloads that only have to report every 90 days. And that's, of course, certain offenses that meet certain criteria. Ideally, if they're coming into this office every 90 days and you want to continue to test them on a regular basis, you could test them every time they came in, and they are tested the whole time frame, even though they were only in this office once every 90 days. So those are just a couple of examples.
And that's really interesting because in the workplace market for drug testing, urine testing, of course, is very popular. And sending somebody to an offsite collection site where they're going to void a sample. And of course, there's always the threat or the concern of somebody trying to subvert the drug test process to cheat on the test by substituting a sample or by adulterating a sample. What about with hair testing? Do those methods typically work with hair testing?
No, and during the course of the pilot, of course, it was a adjustment. For staff slightly, but for defendants, they weren't used to this, and all of a sudden, oh my, we're doing this test that is very, very, very hard, in my opinion, through my experience, to get around. I had people, you could tell, bleach their hair. They fried their hair with something. I had one admit to pouring gasoline on their hair. You name it, I probably heard it. They were still positive.
Wow.
So, yes.
Now, one area in the workplace market where hair testing is popular is with trucking companies, large trucking companies. Now, they're typically required under the U.S. Department of Transportation drug and alcohol testing regulations to conduct a lab-based urine test, which has that shorter window of detection.
Okay.
But as a precursor to that urine test, a lot of the big companies will do the hair test because of its longer window of detection. And then if somebody passes the hair test, they'll go on and do the urine test in compliance with the regulations. So in your world, how does the sort of window of detection with hair and the positivity rates that you typically experience compare to other testing methods?
I would say, if I'm quoting right, during the pilot, as far as our rapid and our lab confirmed, comparing those numbers, it was like 95% accuracy. And the thing about that is, about the hair testing, is you're in control of that. So it's harder in urine to do that, because if someone uses over the weekend, they don't report till Wednesday or Thursday, it's probably not going to still be in their urine. Whereas hair, if they used 2 weeks ago, sometimes we don't necessarily have to call them in. We can wait till they come in, and it's detectable at that point. So you're in control. I like the fact that you're more in control of the test.
So walk us through a typical process of conducting a hair test. The parolee comes into your office. Is that how it starts?
Yes. So depending on what caseload they're on, we have anything from people that report more than once, twice a week, down to, our lower level offenders can just come in every 90 days. That doesn't, that just depends on their compliance with their conditions of probation. And so they have an office visit with their officer. You do have to be trained. It's not a hard training. I'm a trainer for it, so I do in-office training for hair testing. So instead of, a urine test, a mouse, whatever the case is, then we do have a separate room for our hair test. So that table is cleaned down. Everything that you use is sterile, and you have a rapid. You have a vial, and then you also have. It's similar to a UA cup, just smaller, kind of works similar as far as the look of it and how it absorbs. And so you do a collection, whether it's head hair or body hair. Head hair, obviously, you use scissors, and there's a process behind that. And then body hair, you use a sterile razor. The collection for a rapid is 30 milligrams, which is not a lot of hair. And there's obviously a more technical process behind that, but it's not difficult. That hair is put into the vial, and then it's placed into the processor, and that processor runs for a little over 2 minutes. So there are beads and solution in the vial that break down the hair. So you take the vial and you pour it into your rapid test. And so a negative results will come up within about a minute, a little over a minute. But with your positive, you do have to wait the full 5-minute time frame.
So typically, in a maximum of how many minutes, you'll have a result?
If it's a quick body hair collection, you shave, 1 or 2 swipes of the razor. Especially if someone's been doing it a long time, results in like 7 minutes, the whole process, 7, maybe 8 minutes. So you take that and you compare that to having to take somebody to the restroom. If they stall any length of time, it's probably faster in a lot of sense. So if it's head hair, some people that aren't as comfortable, it might take just a little bit longer, but 10 minutes tops, you typically will have results.
So if somebody comes in and their head is shaven, what do you do?
You look for body hair at that point. A go-to for me is arm hair. You can actually, have someone turn their arm over, like, their palm up basically. And you kind of naturally have a kind of where your hair stops typically. You can take 1 or 2 swipes and kind of basically you're moving that line, and nobody's going to ever know they had a hair test. And I test arm hair a lot. People probably don't like underarm hair does not bother me, and leg hair, of course. So those are kind of your 3 go-to spots as far as body hair.
So with almost everybody, it's possible to get a hair sample.
Yes. There are a few people that don't have, they shave their head and they really just don't have much body hair. I would say in the course of my doing this, I've probably not been able to test 3 or 4 people. I've done over 2,500 tests. So it's kind of rare to not be able to get enough of a sample,
And so you're screening for 12 drugs, you said, right?
Yes.
And what if with your rapid test, somebody
Okay.
tests positive, it's a presumptive positive, then what do you do? Do you confirm at a laboratory?
Um, so our process, yeah, I would say most of the time, yes. Most people, that's what they would do. But in our case, we do, the defendant obviously is still there. And we have a discussion with them. And a lot of times, what ends up happening is we get an admission. So just like that's how we use urine tests too. You think of it as a tool to kind of get more information. And so if you have an admission, there's really not a need to send it anywhere else. But when it is one of those things where you're not getting anywhere with your discussion, then that typically is an additional lab collection, which you basically do a collection. It's quite a bit more hair. It's about 3 times as much hair, 4 times as you did the rapid, and you send that in as a lab collection. You're provided all the supplies. It's not, I mean, you have everything you need in-house to do that.
So obviously, from your days of doing urine testing and maybe oral swab testing, etc., even with hair testing, somebody may contest the result, right? They'll say, no, 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 I haven't been using drugs, right?
Absolutely. I believe this week already we've sent 2 or 3 to the lab, which may not sound like a lot. And then some weeks we might not send any. So
interesting. So, and you have found it to be comparable in terms of positivity rates and things of that nature.
yes.
No issues there. And so, and I realized that, well, I've been in the drug testing business for over 30 years. And so I've
Oh,
been a proponent of urine testing, oral fluid testing, hair
yeah.
testing. I'm always looking for sort of the new kid on the block type of technology to say, how can we make this faster, easier, more affordable, etc. Um, what are some of the advantages of hair testing compared to other methods? Not to say you like hair testing more than anything else. I'm not asking you to do that, but what is it about hair testing that you do like now, having done so many of them?
I'm probably partial to hair testing, but it's for these following reasons too. You don't have to worry about gender. As far as I being a female, I can hair test a female or a male. You don't have, you're not in the restroom in an uncomfortable position like you are with urine testing at times. You don't have that stalling, falsification, because I hate to say it, but it's not that difficult sometimes for people to falsify a urine test. Flushing their system, there's lots of ways, and we don't have to get into that, but hair is just different in that aspect. And really, I think people have the misconception that it takes more time. It really doesn't take any more time. So those are just a few reasons.
I think it'd be interesting to do a separate podcast with you on all the cheating things that you've seen over the years. I bet you've got some stories to tell.
Yes, and what I will kind of that will does relate to that obviously is you will have we call them defendants here, and some people refer to client, however that term can be interchangeable. They will have negative drug tests as far as in the file, as far as negative urine tests. In other testing that we do as well. And then here you have a hair test and you're positive, and you're like, wow, is this just a coincidence where we time it? And some will tell you a lot of it honestly has to do with timing it. I think I use that example. Use on the weekend, you come in Wednesday or Thursday, you're about out of your testing. You are out of your testing time frame with urine typically. So it just, yes, we have revealed a lot of information that way.
I bet. And this is probably pretty obvious, but which are the drugs that people test positive for the most?
Here in Texas, methamphetamines. Cocaine is actually kind of goes in spikes up and down. I don't guess I realized that it kind of spacked back up, or maybe we just weren't catching it on urine. I don't know. And then of course fentanyl, like everywhere else. And we do have opiate use. So, but I would say by far methamphetamines.
Really? That's
and
number
then
one.
and then fentanyl is, I would think, increasing as well.
Yeah. Well, obviously, I mean, you're trying to help people, and remaining drug free is paramount to their progress in life. Anything I didn't think to ask you, Jessica, that you'd like to add?
Well, speaking of helping people, I think people kind of get the misconception of probation in general. It's not out to get everybody. It is, we have utilized the hair test for treatment because, going backwards a little bit, people falsifying, people covering it up, those kind of things, they really can't do that with the hair test. And so sometimes I guess you get down to the bottom line of what's going on with the hair test. And I will say we have sent numerous people to treatment, and not solely the hair test, but that was a big deciding factor.
Yeah. Well, Jessica, thank you very much for joining us today and sharing all of this information. I may come back to you, though, for a drug test cheating podcast. I think that would be really interesting.
Okay, I can do that.
All right. Well, if you're listening to today's podcast, check out our other podcasts at currentconsultinggroup.com. You'll find an archive of our podcast. You can find us on Amazon Audible, Spotify, Apple, etc. All the major podcast platforms carry Currently Speaking. With that, again, Jessica, thank you for this really informative time that we've spent together talking about rapid result hair testing, and in particular, the Wanfo USA hair testing processor and test. And with that, we'll wish you all a great day.